Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Listening to his subordinate's report, the leader was somewhat incredulous. To be able to eliminate all of his elite men without anyone noticing, and even let all the slaves escape, the leader couldn't understand what had happened for a moment. The terrorists in the cave below began to fall into chaos, their faces filled with fear. What happened? Are you kidding? Are you King sure you didn't make a mistake? This kid is crazy. This kid is crazy. Let's shoot and kill him. Listening to his subordinates' noisy voices, the leader shouted, "Everyone shut your mouths. Put all the slaves present under the gun. Stay alert at all times." The terrorists below immediately pulled the slaves beside them under their guns. The leader's eyes widened as he vigilantly looked around. A bead of cold sweat trickled down the terrorist leader's face. Although he didn't know what had happened, he was certain that the other party wasn't here for Tony Stark. What did saving Tony Stark have to do with refugees? However, since the other party didn't kill the refugees, he would use them. He would gather the refugees. He didn't believe the other party wouldn't appear. On the entire scene, only the painful cries of the controlled refugees remained. A moment later, the terrorists below began to crack under the high-pressure atmosphere. The refugees under their control continuously begged for mercy. One terrorist started to lose his composure, pointing his gun at a refugee. "Shut up." The refugee continued to mumble pleas for mercy. The terrorist could no longer stand it and aimed at the refugee. "Say one more word, and I'll shoot you dead." Seeing the terrorist pull out his gun, the refugee not only didn't stop talking, but instead fell to the ground, crying uncontrollably. The terrorist's face twitched a few times. The leader was also incredibly tense at this moment. Although he had influence in this area, his vision was limited, and he could only handle the situation to this extent. Not only did he fail to notice the changes in his subordinates, but he also found the refugees' voices too noisy. So he condoned his subordinates shooting. Time passed, and the terrorist could no longer control himself, pulling the trigger. And in that instant, with a crisp sound, the bullet deviated from its original trajectory and hit a terrorist not far away. The terrorist fell to the ground with a thud. The scene instantly descended into chaos. The fall of the terrorist seemed to have flipped a switch. The already high-pressure environment instantly became incredibly noisy. "Attack! Attack! Get out here! Mother****Kerr! Who fired the shot?" Just then, a sound came from a nearby house. Bullets instantly pierced through the house. When the gunfire ceased, the house no longer emitted any sound. However, Tony, standing on the cave above, noticed a detail. The refugee held hostage by that terrorist had disappeared. Tony was greatly shocked internally. He had guessed correctly after all. His goal was to rescue the refugees. He was a good person. At this moment, another house also emitted a sound. Gunfire instantly poured into that house again. At this very moment, several different houses emitted different sounds. Along with the sounds, a few bullets also spilled out from inside the houses. Several terrorists who were suppressing refugees fell to the ground in response. The leader, hiding behind cover, shouted in panic, "Concentrate your gunfire there." The terrorists immediately found cover and began a battle of wits with the air. Watching the terrorists who were kidnapping refugees fall, Tony, having found the pattern, immediately focused his gaze on the terrorists still holding hostages. As expected, another terrorist also fell. The refugees screamed and fled the battlefield. Meanwhile, the terrorists fired at another location where gunfire was heard, with no one paying attention to the fleeing refugees. Seeing this scene, Tony, driven by guilt, developed a certain filter towards Su Xing in his heart. Damn it, that you-know-who yesterday was a great person. There must have been a legitimate reason for his sudden withdrawal. How could it have been quitting work, as he said? Tony, whose logic was now self-consistent, seemed to suddenly sense something. He shifted his gaze to a terrorist not far from him. A figure Tony was now all too familiar with emerged from behind the terrorist. At this moment, Su Xing stood behind the terrorist with a knife, revealing a sinister smile. As a transmigrator, Su Xing had inherited the original owner's memories upon transmigration. He had directly ascended from a clueless novice to a seasoned agent. As a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Su Xing's mind contained various professional knowledge and skills, including no lack of ways to deal with such situations. The theoretical method for rescuing hostages from kidnappers is to attract the enemy's attention, making them no longer constantly focus on the hostages in their hands, thereby creating an opportunity for rescue. In layman's terms, it means being an old fox. After learning the enemy's plan, Su Xing quietly approached the enemy. Relying on the super soldier serum and the knowledge of an agent in his mind, Su Xing silently eliminated all the terrorists guarding the gate one by one. Then, he picked up discarded weapons and placed firepower in every house. With the help of a small gadget developed by S.H.I.E.L.D, Su Xing successfully set the weapons to automatic fire. Meanwhile, Su Xing took advantage of the terrorists' gunfight with the air to eliminate one terrorist after another in their blind spots. Under Su Xing's operation, the terrorists had successfully shifted their focus away from Tony. Su Xing launched a series of shadow attacks, successfully getting closer and closer to Tony. As time passed, Su Xing had already crept up to the terrorist next to Tony. Seeing that he was about to rescue Tony, Su Xing felt a surge of excitement in his heart. This scene, this situation, listening to the terrorist shouts and watching the flames spewing from the muzzles of their guns, Su Xing suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu, like a game of real people CS, real-life Counter-Strike. Ever since gaining his abilities, Su Xing's attitude towards missions had always been to sweep through them with overwhelming power. He had never used his stealth skills. But now, Su Xing felt a strange excitement. Being an old fox was truly exhilarating. Who understood the feeling of sneaking behind an enemy and instantly taking them down with one stab before they even reacted? Standing behind the unlucky guy, Su Xing's smile grew even more sinister. Damn it! The dagger addiction was kicking in. Watching the unlucky guy's shoulder twitch with each shot as he held his gun, Su Xing had only one thought in his mind at that moment: stab him. Su Xing held the steel knife in reverse, mimicking a move from a game. He raised his hand, and the knife plunged downwards. But just as he was about to end the other party's life, Su Xing suddenly felt a tremor in his wrist. Immediately after, the system interface appeared before Su Xing's eyes. 1 minute left until quitting time. Host, please pay attention to the time. Looking at the system prompt, Su Xing's eyes instantly cleared. The knife was instantly retracted. Then he looked up at Tony. And at this very moment, Tony was also staring at Su Xing. Their gazes met perfectly. Su Xing sniffed. Then he lightly raised his wrist and placed a tracker on Tony. Following that, he smiled and walked away without looking back. From Tony's perspective, he saw that familiar shadow, but before he could get excited, something happened that Tony couldn't comprehend. He saw the shadow raise a knife and slash it towards the terrorist's back. The speed was so fast that Tony didn't even react. But then, the knife stopped 1/100th of a centimeter from the terrorist's neck. That shadow pulled the knife back, raised his wrist, and looked at it. Then he looked up at Tony. Tony and that person exchanged glances. The other person gave him a brilliant smile. A few seconds later, that familiar shadow turned and left, as if having made some kind of decision. Tony looked at the scene before him, his brain crashing again. Since childhood, Tony had been very confident in his intelligence. He believed that nothing could ever stump him. But the scene just now made Tony's head smoke. The action of raising his wrist and lowering his head just now. He wasn't looking at the time, was he? If he was looking at the time, then he suddenly left because yesterday's scene reappeared in Tony's mind. He also suddenly lowered his head to look at his wrist like that. Then he gave him that ridiculous reason. Tony's brain and eyes suddenly went to court. Brain, you saw wrong. How could he get off work? He was clearly here to save people. Eyes, he did get off work. Are you blind? Ultimately, the eyes won the case. Tony believed the eyes statement. Looking at the refugees beside the terrorists, snotting and crying, the filter Tony had just built in his heart instantly shattered. Recalling his respect for him just now, if his hands weren't tied, Tony really wanted to slap himself twice. No, you can get off work like this? Is it absolutely necessary for you to get off work? Although his upbringing limited Tony's outburst, but Tony still really wanted to say a few words to him. You can get off work like this. Why don't you just suddenly lower your head and look at your watch at your relative's funeral? and then say off work. At a wedding, when the pastor asks you to swear, do you also lower your head to look at your watch and then say off work? All right? Damn it, fire. Tony looked at the path the other party took as he left. He also made some kind of decision in his heart. If he could return alive, he would immediately organize a company meeting to establish two policies. First, Stark Enterprises would no longer sell weapons. Second, no one can leave when it's time to get off work. Everyone stays and works overtime. No one can make a difference. He said it. At this moment, none of the terrorists knew that the true enemy of this battle had already left. They were still fighting against the few firearms inside the building. Tony covered his ears with his hands, his face full of despair. Meanwhile, Su Xing had already activated autopilot, holding a report, and began his operations. This incident involves too much. Make the greatest effort to achieve a major breakthrough in this mission. According to the current progress, the mission is almost complete. After filling out the mission report, Su Xing submitted it. He tossed his wrist to the side. Su Xing narrowed his eyes, lay back in his chair, and began to nap. Su Xing felt no psychological burden about not having rescued Tony. If Tony wasn't rescued during working hours, what did that have to do with him? God is my witness. He personally risked his life to save Tony. Can he be blamed for looking in the wrong place? Why did Stark Enterprises sell weapons to terrorists? If you didn't sell them, could I have gotten it wrong? If time was delayed, then he couldn't be blamed. Lying comfortably in his chair, Su Xing felt a wave of comfort. Name, Su Xing. Ability, Super Soldier Serum. I can do this all day. Intelligence, 4. Strength, 4.58. Endurance, 3. Combat skills, 4. Speed, 3.26. Note, official data, maximum score 7 points. Remaining points, 0.02. He added the points to speed. Su Xing clicked on the store again. Locked. Looking at the locked, displayed on the screen, Su Xing covered his face with both hands. With the Super Soldier Serum, Su Xing felt no fatigue. But mental exhaustion was clearly not included in this. He touched his face, and Su Xing covered the lower half of his face with his hand. His eyes were filled with helplessness. Days passed, and the main story was about to begin. The system store was still locked. Looking at the scenery outside the window, Su Xing closed his eyes. Forget it. Since it's come to this, let's sleep first. Buzz. Su Xing's just closed eyes opened again. The main pilot interface of the plane displayed Fury requesting connection. Seeing Fury's name, Su Xing bounced up from his seat again. Damn it. Even after work, he still had to be interrogated by his director. This life was truly getting worse by the day. Adjusting his state, Su Xing confirmed the connection. Fury's eye patch face was projected. Su Xing immediately pretended to be diligently searching. Fury looked at Su Xing's appearance with some confusion. Haven't you completed this mission yet, Agent? Su Xing manually operated everything on the plane that could be manually operated, making himself seem very busy. The situation has changed, Director. Tony is involved with other related interests, which makes it a bit difficult. Through the screen, Fury looked deeply at Su Xing. Don't talk about anything else with me, Agent. We all know your abilities. Solving this mission won't take much effort from you at all. Listening to Fury's words, Su Xing complained internally. So, no matter where you go, the ways directors manipulate people are pretty much the same. With this flattery, he had no choice but to complete the mission now. Su Xing was about to open his mouth when Fury interrupted him. Stop your excuses, Agent. I didn't just come to you for this matter. Now there's a new mission that needs you to complete. The detailed information has been sent to you. Remember to check it. Also, saving a Playboy doesn't require you to spend too much time. Tomorrow is the deadline. Complete the mission, and then report to me at headquarters. I have something I want to talk to you about. After speaking, Fury directly hung up the call. Watching Fury's virtual image disappear, Su Xing also stopped his movements. He activated autopilot again. Su Xing reclined his seat again, closed his eyes, and began to sleep. He completely ignored the mission data Fury had sent. Why would he look at damn data after work? He wouldn't get paid more for being so diligent, so he wouldn't look. He'd talk about it when he was back at work. At this moment, in the terrorist base, Tony and Ethan were locked back in the cave. The leader, with bloodshot eyes, said to Tony, "Last chance, Mr. Stark. I'll only give you 1 day to build me the missile you showed the military. If you can't complete it, I don't think we need to continue our cooperation." Hearing the terrorist's demand, Ethan was a little flustered. Although Ethan didn't understand anything about weapon manufacturing, 1 day's time seemed utterly insufficient, no matter how he looked at it. Moreover, they were in such an environment. Ethan originally wanted to ask for more time. But looking at the terrorist's crazed mental state, Ethan still didn't say anything. Ethan turned his gaze to Tony. After all, he was completely unskilled in this area, so the final decision on this matter still rested with Tony. Tony's eyes were sharp. After hearing the terrorist's words, he nodded in agreement without even thinking. Ethan was very surprised to see Tony agree without hesitation. Ethan knew that Tony was a genius. But to be able to fulfill such an unreasonable request in this environment. Or rather, did Tony already have a plan in his mind? Ethan's gaze towards Tony couldn't help but gain a few more traces of admiration. Seeing Tony nod in agreement, the terrorist leader didn't say anything more. He waved his hand and left with his subordinates. After confirming the terrorists had left, Tony turned his head towards Ethan. Seeing Tony look at him, Ethan also looked directly at Tony, ready to hear Tony's plan. Tony's eyes were serious and focused, his voice steady. What did he just say? "Ethan, forgive me, was it me who didn't understand, or?" Ethan asked Tony, puzzled. Tony held out his hand, gesturing for Ethan to stop. I can't hear what you're saying. I think it's because the gunshots just now were too loud." Hearing Tony's words, Ethan's expression became blank. "So you didn't hear the other party's request at all, just now? Then why did you nod?" A moment later, under Ethan's treatment, Tony gradually got rid of his tinnitus. In the previous battle, Tony's ears suffered unprecedented damage. Many people know that firearms make a huge sound when fired. For a weapons merchant like Tony, this was even common knowledge. But the problem was that when developing and testing weapon power, Tony always wore corresponding earmuffs that could greatly block the loud sound of gunshots. And just now, the terrorist gun was almost directly shoved into Tony's ear and fired. Although Tony tried his best to cover his ears, he still couldn't completely avoid hearing damage. When Su Xing ran out of bullets from the gun he left in the room, the terrorists finally stopped their corresponding firing. At this moment, Tony's ears were already filled with a buzzing sound. Ethan, however, relying on his long experience of being kidnapped, immediately took out something hidden in his clothes pocket and stuffed it into his ears at the beginning of the firing, forming a simple sound shield, thus avoiding too much impact. Listening to Ethan's narration, Tony's face became incredibly stiff. After treating Tony's ears, Ethan sighed and asked Tony, "What do we do now?" Tony looked at the raw materials piled around. The material list I provided them earlier was written randomly. That missile simply cannot be built. But Tony looked at the large amount of steel and gunpowder around him. "We can certainly build something else." The next morning, Su Xing, relying on the tracker he placed on Tony yesterday, arrived at the terrorist base without any pressure. After hiding his fighter jet, Su Xing was a little surprised to see the terrorist base, which had already been swept through once. After his attack yesterday, had they still not moved their base? It seemed these terrorists were not just any weaklings. Su Xing laughed heartily. Never mind. The weaker, the better. He loved to bully the weak. He couldn't play high-level games at all. What was the point of a game where you got instantly killed the moment you showed your head? He wiped his knife. Su Xing walked towards the terrorist base. In the cave, Tony touched the nuclear reaction energy source that had been successfully replaced in his chest, connected the computer to the Mark I armor he had built. He began to operate on the computer, preparing to start the program. Looking at the Mark I armor successfully built last night, Ethan's eyes still held a hint of shock. If he hadn't personally participated in the armor's manufacturing process last night, Ethan would have even thought it was a dream. Then Ethan looked at the discarded car electromagnet, and Ethan smiled with relief. Indeed, in such an environment, he could casually conjure up a nuclear reactor. Compared to that, this armor didn't seem so outrageous. "Thank you, Ethan." Tony started the program, and said to Ethan. Ethan was a little surprised. After a period of understanding, Ethan understood even more how arrogant Tony was. To receive a sincere thank you from Tony was something Ethan had previously thought completely impossible. Haha, this is even more astonishing than you making a nuclear power source in 3 hours. Facing Ethan's teasing, Tony also laughed. Then his expression sobered. Seriously, Doctor, if it weren't for you, I might have been killed by the weapons I created on the very first day. Hearing Tony's sincere thanks, Ethan also smiled. It's no big deal, Tony. For a doctor, this is the most basic and inherent duty. Tony looked directly into Ethan's gentle eyes, lowered his head, and smiled. You are right. His resolve to no longer engage in military business became even stronger. Of course, also strengthened was the resolve to revise the company system. From now on, unless there's an accident involving a direct family member, no one is allowed to leave work. Everyone must voluntarily work 2 hours of overtime. Just as the atmosphere was unusually relaxed, the voice of the terrorists came from outside. Tony Stark, is the missile finished? I can't wait to see my missile. The terrorist leader shouted loudly outside the cave. After a night, the bloodshot in the leader's eyes not only didn't decrease, but also gained dark circles around his eyes. After yesterday's battle, no enemy bodies were found in the camp. They didn't even find the opponent's weapons. Only Stark Enterprises' identical weapons were left in those few rooms. The leader hadn't slept well all night. If he hadn't lived in combat for half his life, the leader would have even suspected that supernatural phenomena had appeared in the camp. The leader had thought about leaving this camp quickly, but the subcamp had been destroyed yesterday. The weapons stored in the camp were triggered for some unknown reason. The entire camp was blasted into ruins. It was impossible to use it as a place to stay. With no other choice, the leader had made Tony's missile development his last resort. After waiting for a long time, the leader arrived at the cave early the next morning. Looking at the devastated base, the leader once again recalled the power of that missile on the demonstration ground. As long as he could get that powerful missile, everything would be fine. Taking a few subordinates with him, the leader entered the cave. At this moment, a figure also darted into the base, inside Tony's and Ethan's room. Hearing the sounds from the cave entrance, Tony's heart tightened. Damn it! They came so fast. Helpless, Tony had no choice but to enter the Mark I. Ethan, start the program. Ethan quickly stood in front of the computer and began to operate it. As the energy started, the Mark I also hummed, and the sound eventually converged into the nuclear energy in Tony's chest. Damn it! Tony, can you see it? Tony looked at the screen upon hearing the voice. The loading bar, symbolizing the progress, advanced very slowly. Tony's heart began to panic. The environment inside the cave was too harsh, and building the Mark I overnight was already a very difficult task. To activate the nuclear energy in his chest to provide sufficient energy efficiency for the Mark I was still too slow. Judging by the sound just now, the terrorists were clearly shouting at the cave entrance. Tony closed his eyes and began to calculate. Based on his memory of the cave environment, the Mark I would definitely not have enough time to start before the terrorists entered. Thinking of this, Tony opened his eyes. Looking at Ethan's questioning gaze, Tony didn't know what to do for a solution. Glancing at Ethan, Tony still didn't speak. Actually, strictly speaking, there was no conventional solution. For example, what if that strange person who always left on time suddenly came to work? But considering that Ethan might take his words as nonsense, Tony didn't speak. Seeing Tony's silence, Ethan also fell silent. A few seconds later, Ethan smiled with a sense of relief. Then he looked up and said to Tony, I understand. Tony's brain paused. What do you understand? Without giving Tony time to react, Ethan turned and picked up the gun that had been made nearby and rushed out under Tony's shocked gaze. I'll hold them off. Watching Ethan's actions, Tony, who had come to his senses, immediately spoke to dissuade him. Wait, listen to me. Before Tony could finish, Ethan fired his gun towards the top of the cave. As a doctor, Ethan's professional ethics did not allow him to harm lives. But in the cave, the fire and sound of gunshots would multiply. When the terrorists were unprepared, it could also have a very good effect in the chaos. The bullet casings fell to the ground, making a crisp sound. Tony's voice was also covered by the sound of the gunshots. Ethan shouted and rushed out, completely ignoring what Tony said. With Ethan's sprint, flashes of fire erupted in the dim cave. Feeling the vibration of the gun, Ethan managed to shout with the demeanor of an army. Stepping on the stiff rocks in the cave, Ethan's determination became even stronger. He had finally found a gap in the terrorists' defenses. The Mark I was developed in a short period of time. In Ethan's view, this was all the hope he had to escape. Ethan would absolutely not allow the hope of escape to be shattered. With this mindset, Ethan ran hard through the cave. After running for a while, the piercing gunshots stopped. Click, click. Realizing the magazine was empty, Ethan stopped, panting heavily. Without the gunshots, the cave suddenly became quiet. Ethan, whose adrenaline was slowly fading, then realized something was wrong. Something was wrong. It seemed a little too quiet. Without bullets, Ethan wasn't afraid of accidental discharge, so he pointed the gun downwards and held it up to observe his surroundings. In the silence, a voice suddenly appeared. Doctors who save people with guns are rare. Hearing the voice, Ethan turned towards the direction it came from. A handsome Asian man walked out of the shadows. Looking at Ethan, Su Xing couldn't help but feel a little emotional. In the original movie, Tony, who was kidnapped by terrorists, survived precisely with Ethan's help. It was also through conversations with Ethan that Tony reflected on his past actions. It could be said that without Ethan, Tony might not even be alive, let alone become Iron Man later. When escaping the cave, Ethan still upheld the doctor's principle of saving lives in the face of the terrorists. He ultimately fell at the moment just before the Mark I was activated. Although some people felt that Ethan's actions of not shooting the terrorists were overly saintly. But Su Xing felt that Ethan's persistence in his bottom line until the very end was a remarkable act. Even though Ethan received his lunchbox, died, at the beginning of the movie, Su Xing still had a very deep impression of Ethan. Facing the suddenly appearing you-know-who, Ethan was somewhat at a loss. "You are." Su Xing habitually flicked his blade, then returned it to its sheath. "Don't be nervous, doctor. I am a professional here to save you." Listening to Su Xing's strange self-introduction, Ethan was puzzled. Professional? How did you? The man in front of him wasn't carrying any firearms, so how did he get in? Ethan was about to ask, but then he suddenly realized a problem. He had just fired his gun desperately, and the terrorists outside would definitely have heard it. But he hadn't seen a single shadow on his way here. And even now, no terrorist had come out to stop him. Could it be? Ethan looked at Su Xing with some disbelief in his eyes. Looking around, Ethan didn't see any other figures. His heart grew increasingly eerie. Hesitating for a moment, Ethan still asked, excuse me, did you come alone?" Su Xing nodded. "Yes." Receiving Su Xing's answer. A single person, single-handedly breaking into the terrorist camp and killing everyone. Ethan's gaze towards Su Xing grew even more respectful. Is this even a person? However, living in such a world, Ethan had heard more or less about supernatural phenomena. Not to mention anything else. Ethan, in the US, grew up listening to Captain America's stories, so he naturally knew that there were some existences in the world that transcended common sense. It was his first time encountering such a person, and Ethan was somewhat incredulous. After calming down, Ethan suddenly realized that the man's weapons seemed to be two blades. Two blades, Asian. Combining all this information, Ethan spoke. "You must be here for Mr. Stark, right?" Su Xing smiled. "You're right. Excuse me, where is Mr. Stark?" Ethan pointed behind him, preparing to speak, when a huge noise came from the cave. With heavy and powerful steps, Tony, controlling the Mark I, hurried over. "Ethan, are you all right?" Then, Tony saw an unharmed but somewhat nervous Ethan and the familiar face standing next to him. Seeing Tony make a grand entrance in the Mark I, Su Xing was a little excited. Despite being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent and having been transmigrated for some days, he had some resistance to high-tech products. But seeing the Mark I, Su Xing's eyes still lit up. Even though the technological content was not high, it could even be said to have no technological meaning at all. But this was Tony's first suit of armor, the origin of Iron Man. Seeing the real thing appear before his eyes, Su Xing, as a Marvel fan, couldn't help but feel a little excited. Seeing Su Xing, Tony's heart was filled with a multitude of emotions at this moment. But the words were on the tip of his tongue, and Tony didn't know what to say. After a few seconds of silence, Tony spoke. "Are you at work?" As the plane cut through the air, it landed on the airport runway. After taxiing for a distance, it came to a stop. Facing the swarming reporters and countless camera flashes, Tony and Dr. Ethan walked down the plane's ramp. Breathing in the fresh air, Tony's heart was incredibly calm. "I'm back. I'm finally back." In the movie, Happy, Tony's bodyguard, also arrived in his special car. Ignoring the reporters' cameras, Tony and Ethan, guided by Happy, got into the special car. Feeling the soft seat beneath him, Tony exhaled, completely relaxing. Looking at the familiar Happy, Tony's face once again showed his characteristic confidence. "Tell me, my friend, when did you arrive?" Happy started the car, glanced at his boss in the rearview mirror, and answered honestly, "An hour early, sir." "Why not 2 hours early?" I just got the notification 3 hours ago, and I wasn't even awake then. If you wanted me here 2 hours early, I'd have to be on call 24 hours a day, sir." "Very well, because from now on, you will no longer have the concept of getting off work." Question mark. In the distance, Su Xing recorded this scene of Tony's return home. With the mission log, Su Xing boarded the fighter jet and flew to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters in the sky. After uploading the mission data and clocking in, Su Xing suddenly heard a voice. Ding! Detecting Tony Stark has completed his transformation. Shop unlock condition met. The beginning of everything. With the appearance of Iron Man, the entire world will undergo significant changes. To ensure the host punches in and out on time, the shop has now been unlocked. Shop opening reward. First exchange, 10% discount on required points. Hearing the system's voice, Su Xing was extremely excited. Damn it, it's finally unlocked. Until the second before, Su Xing, watching Tony return, still felt immense pressure. Many people say that the birth of Iron Man was marked by the Mark II, which featured a new arc reactor and whose capabilities and appearance established the style of the armor. Others say that the birth was marked by the Mark I, the first set of armor, which was clumsy in appearance and limited in capability, from the cave. But in Su Xing's view, Tony had already become Iron Man when he personally witnessed villains using weapons he developed to commit evil, and he took responsibility. How does that saying go? You can take away Tony's Iron Man armor, his vast wealth, but you can never take away the iron heart beneath that ordinary body. The armor was only a matter of time. Iron Man was already born when he was personally rescued. With the birth of Iron Man, the major turning points in the entire world were also fast approaching. Various world-ending events began to appear frequently. With the system's current daily increase of 0.02, he simply couldn't keep up with the speed of power expansion. When the events truly occurred, he would inevitably be stretched thin. But now, the opening of the shop finally allowed him to stop worrying. After all, why bother making things difficult for himself when he could easily crush the situation? Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Su Xing opened the shop. Exchanging with points meant that he finally didn't have to accumulate those pitiful 0.02 points every day anymore. Opening the shop, the screen was filled with items. After skipping over a series of abstract items such as M1917 US Smith & Wesson and SpongeBob's jellyfishing net, Su Xing's eyes lit up as he saw a very satisfactory product. Above the product name, there was also a thoughtful illustration. This was a creature like a Greek sculpture. Its skin was purple, its face heroic, and its muscles were strong and well-defined. A flowing mane of long hair swayed in the wind. Su Xing eagerly clicked on the details interface. Symbol of invincibility. Platinum star. Aura, 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 aura. As an anime fan, Su Xing was all too familiar with this image in his previous life. Stand, a very popular concept from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. According to the official setting, a stand is a powerful manifestation produced by the life energy within a person's body. Those who possess a stand are called stand users. Since a stand is an external manifestation of its user, reflecting the user's personality and characteristics, The stand's appearance and abilities also vary. It could be a beautiful sculpture like Platinum Star or a creature like a small bug. Their abilities also had their own merits. They could transcend space, reverse time, and could be said to be all-encompassing. This included various bug-level abilities. For example, a stand that could link with parallel worlds and, to some extent, ensure immortality. There was also an ability that could manipulate the concept of misfortune, which was practically unsolvable. For various stands, the points required by the system also differed. Some stand abilities were too overpowered. Even with a 10% discount on exchange points, it would take a long time to accumulate them with only 20 points per day. The urgent situation prevented Su Xing from waiting that long, so he chose Platinum Star after considering points, compatibility, and future growth potential. Compared to other flashy stands, Platinum Star was all about simple brutality. Nothing else. Just stats. The stats of Platinum Star were incredibly powerful, except for its range, which was the lowest at E. All its other basic attributes were the highest at A, and it was the kind of A where the upper limit was only A. For Su Xing, who urgently needed power, Platinum Star was undoubtedly the most suitable stand. Although the basic Platinum Star itself did not have the strange skills of other stands, its growth potential was definitely not weak. The evolved version of Platinum Star the World, possessed the ability to stop time. And the ultimate version of Platinum Star over Heaven, even possessed the ability to rewrite reality. Su Xing was even more surprised to find that the subsequent two evolved versions of Platinum Star could be directly exchanged through the system. It was just that the required points were a bit too outrageous. At least, Su Xing couldn't afford them right now. Looking at the most basic version of Platinum Star, Su Xing calculated the time required on his fingers. A few days, then. Su Xing pondered for a moment and finally made up his mind. Of the reliable abilities that could be directly exchanged now, besides useless, overpowered items like SpongeBob's jellyfishing net, reliable abilities like Platinum Star all required roughly the same amount of time. Furthermore, for the ability of Platinum Star, a few days' time was relatively very cost-effective. Closing the system interface, Su Xing relaxed. Anyway, he had waited this long, so waiting a few more days was no big deal. Having unlocked the shop and found a very satisfactory item, Su Xing was in a very joyful mood. In his joy, he set the fighter jet to its lowest gear. He reclined the modified seat and lay down comfortably. He was in a good mood today, so he would give himself a good reward. In the director's office at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Fury checked the time. "Agent, if I'm not mistaken, it's been 4 hours since you submitted your mission report." Su Xing sat in a chair not far from Fury. "Completing the mission was quite draining, Director. I think a rest is reasonable." Glancing at Su Xing, Fury stood up. "It's been 3 days since you took this mission. I don't believe a group of terrorists who haven't formed a proper force could exhaust you this much." Su Xing shrugged. "I did my best, Director. Stark Enterprises involved a lot of things. You know, political aspects and such." Fury slammed his hand on the table, his voice suddenly deepening. "You don't need to consider political issues, Agent." Hearing Fury's change in tone, Su Xing pursed his lips, saying nothing further. Fury looked at Su Xing, his tone still heavy, but he changed the subject. "I'm not angry with you for that reason, Su." Fury walked in front of Su Xing, a hint of disappointment on his face. "We all know how much potential you have. You don't need to argue with me about that. And what does an agent like that do all day? Laziness, laxity, leaving work on time." Meeting Fury's gaze, Su Xing pulled a paper contract from his pocket. "Director, while I don't want to contradict you, leaving work is written in the contract." Fury snatched the contract. "Don't talk to me about contracts, Su. This is a serious job. You need to adjust your attitude." Su Xing looked at the contract in Fury's hand, completely unfazed. "You promised this to me, Director. You know how much I suffered that time. This is the condition for me to still do this job." Fury was speechless upon hearing Su Xing's words. The identity of a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent didn't actually involve contracts. For one, a normal job requires you to submit your resume. But S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't. They investigate your information themselves, and the compiled data is incredibly detailed. What you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. definitely knows. What you don't know, S.H.I.E.L.D. also knows. The so-called contract was more of a formality. It simply represented your consent to work. Because it was largely useless, there wasn't much difference between having it and not having it. When recruiting Su Xing, Fury found the other party's joke amusing, so he casually gave him a standardized contract. Fury hadn't reviewed the various requirements in the contract. He didn't intend to enforce them anyway. Similarly, after signing, Su Xing hadn't taken the contract seriously either. From Fury's perspective, during one mission, due to lack of support, Su Xing had stubbornly persevered for several months. He ultimately pushed beyond his physical limits and collapsed before the mission was completed. During the emergency rescue, Su Xing had momentarily lost all vital signs. But fortunately, Su Xing pulled through, and the recovered Su Xing immediately demanded that he prioritize the terms of the contract. To appease Su Xing, and also feeling a slight pang of guilt, Fury agreed, and at Su Xing's insistence, he signed and left his information. Who knew that ever since then, Su Xing had completely changed his diligent work attitude, becoming lazy and lax all day. And he truly followed the terms of that contract, arriving on time and leaving on time. Never a minute early, never a second late. Seeing Fury speechless, Su Xing, with a flick of his wrist, pulled out a copy of the contract from his pocket, breaking the silence. "Director, your signature is clear as day." And from Su Xing's perspective, after he transmigrated, the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was a pristine white ceiling. And after he sorted everything out, he awakened his system. Facing the system's demands, Su Xing immediately produced the contract, demanding Fury fulfill his promise. As for why an agent would have a contract, and why there would be clauses about working hours in the contract, Su Xing didn't want to know at all. Seeing Su Xing pull out another contract, Fury felt a headache coming on. If it were before, Fury wouldn't have cared much about it either. After all, Su Xing's abilities were undeniable. For some unknown reason, Su Xing's abilities had greatly improved after his recovery. To this, Fury had dispatched Black Widow to investigate Su Xing. But there had been no progress. Considering that Su Xing had carried out many major missions, and especially knew too many S.H.I.E.L.D. secrets. So Fury tried his best to appease Su Xing. As long as he didn't directly betray S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury let him be. But now, things happening in the world were becoming increasingly fantastical. Fury's plan to establish the Avengers was becoming more and more urgent. And Su Xing, whose abilities had improved, was the first candidate for this plan. But now, gazing at Su Xing's nonchalant expression, Fury sighed and returned the contract to Su Xing. Then he walked to the table, took a file from the drawer, and tossed it to Su Xing. "There's a new mission, Agent. This is the relevant information. More details have been sent to you. Check them yourself." Su Xing took the file and started flipping through it. And the first page of the file made Su Xing feel a bit numb. Incredible muscles, green skin, and wild eyes. Isn't this the Hulk? Why is S.H.I.E.L.D. getting involved in this now? Hulk. Born from an experimental accident, he caused a rampage years ago, and the military deployed a large number of troops, all of whom were easily destroyed. After the battle, Hulk disappeared until recently. Su Xing looked at the file. Hulk's real name was Bruce Banner, currently hiding in Brazil. As he read the file, Su Xing's mind also formed an impression of the Hulk storyline. After causing a ruckus, Bruce Banner left the U.S. and hid around the world. He then fled to Brazil, learning to control his emotions alone and researching a cure to eliminate the Hulk. In his memory, he accidentally injured his hand while working in a factory, causing blood to flow into a drink bottle. Finally, this bottle of drink, containing a drop of Banner's blood, was sent to the U.S., causing a customer to lose their life. Under General Ross's persistent investigation, this clue finally exposed Bruce Banner's whereabouts. Thinking of this, Su Xing recalled more details. In the movie, Banner and General Ross's daughter, Betty, fall in love. To satisfy General Ross's ambition, Dr. Banner, as a genius scientist, participated in a project similar to Captain America's serum. And he personally injected the relevant serum, but an accident occurred. Hulk was born from this. It can be said that the birth of the Hulk had the most direct connection to General Ross. Su Xing flipped through a few pages, and as expected, That was all the information about the Hulk's origin, with no mention of General Ross whatsoever. And the subsequent content was all about Hulk's combat information. Su Xing scanned a few lines and then closed the file. Director, what is my mission then? Fury leaned on the table, meeting Su Xing's gaze. Your mission is simple. Make as much contact with the Hulk as possible and gather relevant information. If possible, capture him. Remember, this operation has no connection to the military. Don't worry about the military's wishes. If there's any progress, we'll take over. Su Xing nodded. I understand. Fury waved his hand. If you understand, then get going. Su Xing glanced at his watch and opened his mouth. Fury noticed Su Xing's movement, his eyes showing displeasure, and he warned Su Xing. I hope you understand the importance of this mission, Su. I don't want to hear anything related to leaving work. Hearing Fury's warning, Su Xing seamlessly yawned. All right, Director. After speaking, he walked out of Fury's office. Whatever. If he doesn't want to hear it, then fine. Then I just won't tell him when I leave work, right? In the clear blue sky, Su Xing piloted his fighter jet to rendezvous with the military. As he reviewed the mission details, Su Xing couldn't help but inwardly complain again. This operation, according to the mission details, was supposed to be a collaboration with the military. But in reality, the plan to capture the Hulk was proposed and orchestrated by the military. He was merely S.H.I.E.L.D's insertion to gather intelligence. To put it nicely, he was an advisor, providing expertise. To put it bluntly, he was there to meddle and steal intelligence. Looking at the advisor role assigned to him in the mission details, Su Xing felt utterly speechless. Me, an advisor? Is this for real? How am I supposed to know how to minimize casualties during the Hulk's capture? Why not just avoid fighting the Hulk? After reading the detailed information, Su Xing still felt a lot of pressure. Opening the system and looking at his various stats, Su Xing's pressure skyrocketed. Name, Su Xing. Ability, Super Soldier Serum. I can do this all day. Intelligence, 4. Strength, 4.58. Endurance, 3. Combat skills, 4. Speed, 3.28. Note, official data, full score 7. Remaining points, 0. System store unlocked. Looking at his personal panel, Su Xing felt like he was going bald. Me, fighting the Hulk. Is this for real? Su Xing had no doubt that with his current abilities, if he really faced the Hulk, he would be unreasonably crushed. He couldn't possibly get Captain America's same 5-5 split passive just because he took the same super soldier serum as Captain America, could he? Captain America's 5-5 split meant fighting the Hulk to a draw. His 5-5 split would probably mean being torn into 5 pieces by the Hulk in 5 minutes. Thinking of this, Su Xing got a headache. No. In this mission, no matter what, he couldn't directly confront the Hulk. Ideally, there should be no conflict with the Hulk at all. If the problem could be solved while the Hulk was Bruce Banner, then it should be solved under those circumstances. After deciding on the guiding principle for his actions, Su Xing began to ponder another question. In this operation, should he actually carry out the mission and help the military capture the Hulk? Su Xing slowed down, thinking carefully. If the Hulk were really captured, he would, without a doubt, fall into the hands of the U.S. military. And the U.S. military obeys the U.S. government. Given the U.S. government's track record of developing Captain America, it was no surprise that if the Hulk fell into their hands, he would be used as a sample to research how to create weapons. The Super Soldier Serum, thanks to the persistence of the main scientific researchers, was, after much persuasion, given to Steve Rogers. If it had been someone with ill intentions, it would have truly become a soldier boy. So, if the Hulk were handed over to General Ross, what would he do? Recalling General Ross's outrageous act of chasing his son-in-law like a dog, Su Xing decided against it. Otherwise, it might inexplicably trigger another major incident. With his current abilities, even one Hulk was a headache, let alone a group of rampaging Hulks. Thinking of this, Su Xing made up his mind. This mission would be treated like an acting role, helping the Hulk escape. As for S.H.I.E.L.D, based on his knowledge of the Hulk from his previous life, he could just write a few lines to report to his superiors. The Hulk had no weaknesses at all. Even if S.H.I.E.L.D had all the information, they couldn't do anything to the Hulk. No skill, pure strength. As for the military, Su Xing sat up straight. Whatever, it's not his problem to worry about anyway. Glancing at the system time, Su Xing felt a surge of anxiety. The common thought of all workers emerged in his mind. Damn it! Why isn't it quitting time yet? Under the setting sun, General Ross, protected by a group of soldiers, awaited the landing of an aircraft. The ramp lowered, and a burly, shifty-eyed special operative descended. General Ross, seeing the arrival, stepped forward with a smile and shook his hand. Bronsky, I've been waiting for your arrival. Bronsky put down his briefcase and shook hands with the smiling General Ross. Is there anything you don't understand about this mission? Hearing General Ross's question, Bronsky shook his head slightly. No, officer, I understand this mission very well. The setting sun's light shone on Bronsky's face, further highlighting Bronsky's fanatical eyes. Please rest assured, I am very interested in this mission. Looking at the chilling enthusiasm in Bronsky's eyes, the smile on General Ross's face not only didn't disappear, but grew even wider. Withdrawing his hand, General Ross was very satisfied with Bronsky. Bronsky, born in Russia, raised in Britain. Due to his excellent personal abilities, he was recruited by the U.S. military. In the military, his superiors gave extremely high evaluations of Bronsky's abilities. However, in every evaluation, they all, without exception, mentioned Bronsky's personality. Cruel and brutal, only thinking of combat, lacking the normal human empathy. This evaluation appeared in almost every assessment of Bronsky. In the eyes of other officers, Bronsky's personality was a major flaw. But in General Ross's eyes, this was not a deduction, but rather a bonus. Cruel and brutal, only thinking of combat. Isn't that precisely an efficient war weapon? As for the officers' evaluations, General Ross believed this further corroborated Bronsky's excellence. For battle-hardened officers to evaluate him this way, Bronsky's personal characteristics must be incredibly prominent. He was very suitable for this mission to capture the Hulk. After all, before the Hulk transformed, he always appeared in the form of Bruce Banner. In Ross's eyes, ever since the Hulk transformed, there was no longer a person named Bruce Banner. Satisfied, General Ross patted Bronsky's shoulder and gave orders to the people around him. Gentlemen, let's go. At this moment, General Ross's personal guard softly reminded him. Officer, S.H.I.E.L.D's advisor hasn't arrived yet. Should we wait? Hearing the mention of S.H.I.E.L.D., General Ross's relaxed brows furrowed. General Ross had known about S.H.I.E.L.D's existence since the Hulk's birth. Soon after the Hulk's birth, personnel claiming to be from S.H.I.E.L.D. arrived. And General Ross didn't even know how they had learned about the Hulk. The Hulk's birth was originally a secret, and it was only due to an accident that it could no longer be concealed. Listening to the other party meticulously describe the Hulk's abilities, General Ross wouldn't have been surprised if the other party revealed all his secrets the next second. As a strong man, Ross disliked having his weaknesses in others' hands, so he had no good feelings for S.H.I.E.L.D. In this operation, General Ross scoffed at S.H.I.E.L.D's so-called advisor. Hearing the guard's reminder, General Ross's eyes darkened. Ignore him. If he hasn't assembled, it means he's overdue. Let's go. Hearing General Ross's words, the surrounding soldiers saluted and walked towards the aircraft. But before they had walked a few steps, a highly futuristic fighter jet appeared at the airport. A soldier shouted loudly towards them. General, S.H.I.E.L.D's officer has arrived. Hearing the soldier's report, General Ross had no choice but to stop. Looking at the plane not far away, General Ross's aversion to S.H.I.E.L.D. increased even further. It was like this again. Such a large plane appeared next to him, and he didn't even notice when it arrived. The cabin door opened, and Su Xing walked down from the plane. Seeing the American soldiers in the distance, Su Xing quickened his pace. Walking up to General Ross, Su Xing smiled and politely extended his hand. Are you General Ross? Looking at Su Xing's outstretched hand, General Ross did not shake it, but instead raised his wrist and checked his watch. You're late, Mr. Consultant. Su Xing withdrew his hand indifferently, a smile still on his face. Something came up. General Ross lowered his raised wrist and said to Su Xing, were the threatened people also delayed by you? Listening to General Ross's sarcastic words, Su Xing still didn't get angry, but he did retract the smile from his face. I know what I'm doing, General. General Ross snorted coldly. Perhaps. After speaking, General Ross walked towards the plane. Su Xing was about to follow, but General Ross suddenly turned around. You can go by yourself, consultant, so our plane doesn't delay your time. After speaking, General Ross boarded the plane and the soldiers around him followed. Looking at General Ross's back, Su Xing stopped the operation on his wrist. The plane then took off directly, completely disregarding Su Xing, who was left at the airport. Watching the plane depart, Su Xing shrugged and walked towards his fighter jet. Su Xing had long anticipated the military's attitude. But facing General Ross's attitude, Su Xing still felt a bit helpless. If possible, Su Xing really wanted to use his consultant identity to provide some convenience for Hulk. The best plan was to secretly help Hulk escape without conflicting with the military. But now it seemed that they didn't take his consultant identity seriously at all. Recalling General Ross's attitude just now, Su Xing felt a pang. With that attitude, it's possible that the military originally didn't intend to take direct action. If he had gone forward to persuade them, the tranquilizers in their guns would have immediately been replaced with bullets. Sitting on the plane, Su Xing sighed. No way. Since this plan couldn't be carried out, he could only secretly help Hulk himself. Entering the command, the fighter jet soared into the sky. Looking at the empty information bar, Su Xing's heart was calm. General Ross didn't provide Hulk's exact location, which meant he wanted him to follow the military plane. Su Xing smiled faintly. He pushed the speed to the maximum. Normally, he always wanted to slack off and kept it at the lowest setting. Did they really think he couldn't fly fast? He used to treat sidewalks like highways. I tolerated everything else, but you want me to follow you? Calling up S.H.I.E.L.D's database, Su Xing directly pinpointed the location. If they didn't give it, they didn't give it. It wasn't like he hadn't seen the movie. Looking at the plane ahead, Su Xing vanished in an instant. The winds shifted. In a rental house somewhere in Brazil, Bruce Banner was lying in the rental house. The climate at this time was the hot season within Brazil. An old fan hung above the bed, creaking and swaying. Banner's eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, unmoving. Unlike the outward calm, Banner's heart was like the scorching summer weather. A sticky, irritable feeling. Listening to the noisy yet familiar quiet in the building, Banner closed his eyes. These days were truly difficult to endure. As long as the Hulk problem wasn't resolved, he couldn't live peacefully for a single day. Who could guarantee that he wouldn't suddenly turn into Hulk and wildly smash everything around him because of some small matter in the next second? At this moment, a blue light suddenly brought a bit of brightness to the dim room. Banner immediately sat up from the bed and went to the computer. There were a few messages on the screen. Mr. Blue, I received your message. I can solve your problem. Mr. Blue, but I need you to provide more specific information. Seeing the message, Banner irritably rubbed his forehead with his hand. More data was all with his girlfriend, but he had just managed to settle down, so he couldn't go back, could he? Looking at Mr. Blue's reply, Banner found himself in a dilemma. If he didn't go back, he couldn't get the original data, and his problem would be difficult to solve. But if he went back, that would bring danger to his girlfriend. And just as Banner was agonizing, a knock on the door came. Banner immediately shut down the computer and put on his clothes. He stuffed some items into the bedsheets, faking the illusion that he was sleeping on the bed. Then he grabbed his jacket and put it on, putting the computer and pre-prepared supplies into his backpack. After packing, Banner tore a rope from the wall and went to the window, starting to descend along the rope. Wrapped by two windows, Banner directly turned and entered another room downstairs. The rope was still scattered, creating the illusion that he wanted to descend. The window was opened, and Banner placed both feet inside the house. Sneaking into the lady's house downstairs through the window is not a good habit, Mr. Banner. Hearing the voice, Banner subconsciously turned his head and then saw an Asian-looking, handsome man sitting in a chair, looking at him with a smile. Banner looked at the man in front of him, his brain working rapidly, thinking of a way to escape. Su Xing observed Banner's every move and lowered his voice. Mr. Banner, please understand, I have no ill intentions. It's a complicated story, but I'm here to help you. Banner looked at Su Xing warily, constantly shifting his feet. Help me? Help me with what? Su Xing's expression was tense. his inner tension no less than Banner's. Just kidding. This was Hulk. One wrong move, and he'd go berserk. He might suddenly transform and punch him, and he'd be dead right here. Trying to soothe Banner, Su Xing raised both hands in a French military salute. Your information has been exposed. General Ross is on his way, and I'm here to help you escape. Banner kept scanning Su Xing's body. Why are you helping me? Su Xing slightly lowered his left hand, still maintaining a smile. This matter is even more complicated, but I can assure you, I have no ill intentions towards you. Now, if you wish, we can have a good talk, and I will answer all your questions. Listening to Su Xing's sincere words, Banner stopped moving further into the room and halted his actions. Seeing Banner stop, Su Xing's heart relaxed a little. If you want, we can talk right here. Why are you in my house? Banner. The voice of the homeowner came from behind, and Su Xing, in his relaxed state, instinctively looked back. A scratching sound came from beside his ear. Su Xing turned his head and saw Banner directly climbing out the window. Fuck! Su Xing quickly went to the window and stuck his head out to look down. Banner slid down a few meters, grabbing the rope, then directly jumped down. He rolled upon landing, stood up, and immediately ran away. The entire process was smooth and seamless, without any hesitation. Su Xing stood by the window, looking at Banner's fluid movements, feeling a bit bewildered. Damn it! Was this still the naive Hulk from the Avengers movie? Su Xing cursed under his breath, watching Banner disappear into the crowd. Who are you? Is something wrong with Banner? Ignoring the woman's concerned question, Su Xing walked towards the window. Don't worry, ma'am, he's perfectly fine. I hope so. Stepping 5 or 6 paces back from the inner window, Su Xing let out a long sigh. Why do I have to wear a suit and leather shoes for a mission? Looking at the window, Su Xing loosened his tie and took a deep breath. Then, in 2 steps, he ran directly towards the window. Reaching the window sill, he flipped over and flew down. The wind howled. A sharp whistle sounded in his ears. Just a second later, his body made contact with the ground. Using his hands to push off, he rolled. Then Su Xing scrambled to his feet and chased after Banner. Amidst the crowd, Banner ran forward at full speed, completely ignoring the curses coming from behind him. At a street corner, Banner stopped, leaning against the wall, panting heavily. Looking at his rapidly soaring heart rate on his wrist, Banner forced himself to calm down, closed his eyes, and slowly adjusted his breathing. After a few seconds of breathing, Banner looked at his wrist again. His heart rate slowly decreased, and Banner also breathed a sigh of relief. Before Banner could rest, he saw Su Xing, dressed in a suit, approaching from the corner. Banner, who had just managed to stop, saw Su Xing coming and, ignoring everything else, ran desperately towards another location. Just as Su Xing was about to give chase, a hawker pushing a cart happened to block Su Xing's path, briefly stopping his pursuit. Seeing Banner blend into the crowd again, Su Xing's heart pounded with anxiety. Damn it! Arriving at Banner's residence before the military was certainly not due to a simple moment of impulsiveness. Since the military didn't want to cooperate with him, their attitude towards Banner would only become more aggressive in the face of his dissuasion. In any case, gently helping Banner escape was already impossible. So, he would just have to communicate with Banner without the military knowing. Who knew that after he rushed to find Banner, Banner would be too sensitive and show no reaction to his goodwill at all, and he couldn't directly make a move. While others in this timeline might not know, Su Xing was all too clear about what Hulk was. In most people's understanding, Hulk only passively emerged when Banner was under mortal threat. But Su Xing, who had read the comics and understood the lore, fully knew. How could Hulk be passively appearing? He was inside Banner's body, staying awake every single moment. He never slept for a second. When you were talking to Banner, he was staring at you through Banner's eyes. As long as you inflicted even a little damage on Banner that he couldn't bear, Hulk would directly take over, punch you into the wall, and you wouldn't be able to get out. Although he had been strengthened by the system and possessed the ability to escape from Hulk's grasp. But as soon as Hulk appeared, General Ross would get the news, and then it would be troublesome. In the military's view, should he make a move or not? With his current strength, he didn't have the ability to act under Hulk's nose. adding in the dense crowd around. Su Xing had no choice but to use words to persuade Banner. The hawker's cart finally moved past Su Xing. Su Xing found that Banner had disappeared, and his heart was somewhat anxious. If he kept running like this, the military would arrive soon. Given the military's nature, they would probably act directly, and then it would be troublesome. Thinking about the details in the movie, Su Xing turned and ran towards a local factory area. In the movie, Banner believed he knew the factory well enough, so he ran into it to evade the military's pursuit. Thinking of this, Su Xing tapped his wrist a few times, bringing up a real-time map. After planning his route, he quickly ran towards the factory where Banner worked, hoping to intercept Banner there. At the same time, inside Banner's residence, in the building where the chase had just taken place, several fully armed Special Forces soldiers, carrying tranquilizer guns, appeared. Hiss, hiss. Bronsky, attention, according to our intelligence, Hulk is in this building. Stay vigilant at all times. Behind the scenes, General Ross was communicating with the Special Forces soldiers at the front via walkie-talkie. On the monitor, Bronsky tapped his earpiece and said softly, "Understood. Not to question your decision, General, but I'm still frustrated that I can't just blow this monster away with one shot." General Ross picked up the walkie-talkie, watching the various surveillance screens in front of him. "When we catch Hulk, I'll give you a chance to engage him. But for now, strictly follow orders, and no more complaints, soldier." Listening to the Roger coming from the walkie-talkie, General Ross put it down. Looking at the surveillance outside Banner's door, General Ross's eyes were filled with hatred and contempt. If he could, he would be the one who most wanted to point a gun at this monster's head and end his life with a single shot. But unfortunately, after multiple direct encounters, General Ross understood. No attack could directly kill this monster calling himself Hulk. As long as Banner received an attack beyond his body's tolerance, then that terrifying monster would emerge from Banner's body. The best way was to tranquilize him with a large dose of anesthetic before he transformed. Then, he would be handed over to professionals, who would restrain him as quickly as possible, with continuous anesthesia throughout. This was the most effective and theoretically most likely way to defeat Hulk. General Ross's eyes were cold. He just hated Hulk, he wasn't stupid. Why would he directly attack head-on when he could use a method that minimized casualties? At this moment, a very faint gunshot sound came from the walkie-talkie. General Ross shifted his gaze from Banner's doorstep back to the surveillance screen. On the screen, Bronsky raised his gun and pulled the trigger once. General Ross frowned, picked up the walkie-talkie, and said in a serious tone, "Bronsky, what's going on?" Bronsky's nonchalant voice came through the walkie-talkie. "There was a dog in the street. I was afraid it would suddenly bark and expose our whereabouts, so I fired a shot and killed it." Although the guns of the Special Forces soldiers carrying out the capture of Banner were loaded with tranquilizers, the dosage of these tranquilizers was very high for dealing with Hulk, let alone killing a dog. They could even be used to directly kill people. General Ross frowned, agreeing with Bronsky's actions internally. But listening to the nonchalant voice on the walkie-talkie, General Ross was afraid that he would directly kill people just like this dog. So he said into the walkie-talkie, "Although your mission is to bring Hulk back, try to involve as few innocent civilians as possible." Bronsky's reply came through the walkie-talkie. His trusted aide next to him asked General Ross with a worried expression, "General, do we really not need to worry about that S.H.I.E.L.D. consultant?" General Ross's gaze didn't move an inch. "Don't worry about him. What help can he provide? Just let him follow behind and not cause trouble." After a pause, General Ross asked again, "Has he not arrived yet?" The trusted aide next to him said, holding his communicator, "There's no news from him yet. He probably hasn't arrived." General Ross straightened his back. He hadn't given the other party Hulk's exact location. If that consultant wanted to participate in this operation, he had to contact him. Since there had been no contact yet, it could only mean he had lost his way in the air. General Ross sneered. "Those S.H.I.E.L.D. thieves, all they can do is steal other people's things, nothing else. Display the map's materialized route." Su Xing directly bypassed many busy streets. He pushed off the ground and landed directly on top of the many houses lining the street. He ran across the rooftops, heading towards the factory. He ignored the constant shouts from passers-by below. After bypassing a few streets, Su Xing sprinted all the way to the factory where Banner worked. The sun was setting in the west. The factory was already closed, with only a few workers pulling goods from the warehouse next to it. Houses were sparse around the factory, and all were spaced apart. Su Xing glanced at the closed factory entrance, took a deep breath, and backed up a few steps. Then, he turned around, took a few running steps towards the factory, leaped from the edge of the house, and easily landed on the factory roof. Just as Su Xing was pulling out a small explosive device developed by S.H.I.E.L.D from his pocket, preparing to forcefully enter the factory, the corner of his eye caught sight of a group of menacing toughs heading towards the factory. He put away the device, and Su Xing concealed himself from view. Not only did that idiot stop our good thing, he even dared to ignore us and escape right under our noses. We must teach that bastard a lesson. If you ask me, we should just beat him to death. Anyway, there's no one else in the factory. I heard the factory owner wants him to manage this factory. Wouldn't it be bad if we killed him? Bad. We've already offended him. If he becomes the factory owner, won't we have no good days ahead? Then we must kill him. Brothers, get your tools ready. This is a good chance to just kill him directly. Listening to the group's conversation, Su Xing recalled their identities. In the movie, Banner was working in the factory when he happened to see them bullying a female colleague. Banner hesitated repeatedly but still decided to help the weak woman, so he confronted them directly. He was later discovered by the factory manager. Because Banner was exceptionally intelligent and knew how to repair the factory's machines, the manager sided with Banner in this conflict. This group, whose plans were ruined, held a grudge against Banner. Due to Banner's low-key behavior, leaving as soon as work was over, these bullies had no idea where Banner lived. So after work, this group had been wandering the streets, searching for Banner. Eventually, they encountered Banner, who was being pursued by the military and fleeing in panic. They then chased him all the way to this factory. Su Xing stood on the factory roof, watching the group enter through a side door, and silently adjusted his position. In the movie, it wasn't the military that forced Hulk out at all. On the contrary, it was these hooligans who dragged Banner out of his hiding place in the factory. Unsurprisingly, Hulk was also naturally forced out. Su Xing observed the group's movements, adjusted his steps, and quickly followed them. If Banner really transformed into Hulk here, then his actions of getting ahead of the military would be meaningless. At this very moment, Bronsky and his team, who were searching Banner's residence, slowly made their way into Banner's room. At Bronsky's command, several Special Forces soldiers skillfully surrounded all entrances to Banner's room. Bronsky held his gun, his eyes coldly sweeping over one room after another. He opened the bedroom door. Seeing the figure on the bed, Bronsky didn't hesitate at all and instantly fired 3 shots. The figure on the bed immediately took 3 shots. Through the recorder, General Ross's gaze behind the scenes also sharpened. Bronsky motioned for his teammates to be on guard and slowly walked to the bedside. Then he pulled back the bedsheet. General Ross's curses came through the earpiece. Fuck! There was nothing on the bed except a few ordinary pieces of furniture. Officer, you should come and see this. Bronsky quickly walked to his teammate by the window. Looking at the dangling rope outside the window, General Ross fell silent. General Ross had personally watched Bronsky's team infiltrate and could guarantee that no sound was made during their infiltration. Doubt appeared in General Ross's eyes. Could it be that he had placed some detection devices nearby in advance? Considering Hulk's intelligence in his human form, General Ross did not rule out this possibility. The failed infiltration made General Ross feel a surge of annoyance. Pull up our satellite feed. I want to see where he ran off to. The screen in front of General Ross began to switch. The satellite footage started playing from when Bronsky's team was preparing to infiltrate. General Ross watched the footage of Banner's house from above. As time passed, the footage showed no changes. There was no abnormality in the footage of Banner's window. Then, Bronsky's head appeared in the frame. General Ross's brows furrowed even deeper. How could this be? Neither the first-person view nor the high-altitude view showed any sign of Banner. Could he have just vanished into thin air? General Ross was perplexed. After a few seconds, General Ross slapped his forehead. No, that's not right. With a full-angle view, Banner couldn't have just disappeared into thin air. The rope in the window meant that Banner must have run away. Since he's not running now, he must have escaped earlier. Thinking this, General Ross immediately requested to rewind the time. The speed was increased. Bronsky's head retracted from the window. Pedestrians on the street began walking backward. General Ross stared intently at the screen. Suddenly, he shouted, "Stop!" The footage paused. It froze at the moment the rope was thrown out. The footage began to play normally. The rope was thrown from the window. Banner climbed down from it. At the end of the rope, he was just obscured by some awnings. Just as General Ross was about to switch the view, Banner suddenly reappeared from the end of the rope. He fell awkwardly to the ground, then ran away. General Ross watched the subsequent footage, utterly enraged, and slammed his fist on the instrument. His entire face turned red with anger. In the footage, a figure followed closely behind, gracefully dropping to the ground from the window, fluidly rolling and pursuing, wasting no time at all. His face was magnified, clearly Su Xing. The people from S.H.I.E.L.D are a bunch of bandits. General Ross shouted furiously. Who leaked the information? The trusted aide beside him, seeing General Ross's furious expression, looked panicked and said nervously, "No, General, I can guarantee that no information was leaked." General Ross pointed at the screen and roared at his confidant. No information leaked. How did he know Hulk's location? The confidant, startled by the enraged general, his mind blank, couldn't think of any reason to explain to General Ross. "You ask me, I don't know either. How would I know how he got Hulk's exact location? Perhaps he found out through S.H.I.E.L.D. But the confidant dared not say this to the furious General Ross in front of him. After a brief outburst, General Ross calmed down slightly. He, of course, knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. had the ability to determine Hulk's location. But what angered him was that Su Xing had contacted Banner without informing him. He had contributed greatly to the operation to capture Hulk, and S.H.I.E.L.D. had not provided any decent support, only sending a so-called consultant who wanted to extract most of the information from it. And he didn't follow his command at all, acting on his own. General Ross's eyes were bloodshot from the surge of blood caused by his rage. Out of selfishness, Hulk had almost become his obsession. He would not tolerate anyone else interfering with this matter. That was why he was so angry just now. After a few seconds of silence, General Ross opened his mouth, issuing a hoarse command. "Bronsky, chase him. Once found, ignore that S.H.I.E.L.D. consultant and directly administer the tranquilizer. Take him down too."
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.